Okay, everybody, thank you. So we're back live and local. No, we're going to pick up on the second hour. So this is the where we're going to do 30 minutes of deep dive on a topic. We got Paul. He's had a quick sip of water. He'll be going into the task manager. This is this is great for those processes and workflows, the procedures that you have followed. Uh, so it just institutes the discipline. So everybody in your organization, I have this type of request. Everybody follows the same process to do that. So back to you, Paul.
All right. All right. So let me get back into showing my screen here. There we go. And I wanted to get out of that. I think next time I may need to cut down on some of the content there or get out of it quicker, huh? So um, Mike and I kind of talked about what to present and how to present it for today's webinar. And we get a lot of questions about Task Manager every month. There's something new comes up. Somebody has a question, and in the past we've gotten a lot of questions about, well, how do I take this step-by-step process that I've got and put it into Issuetrak and show it, turn it into tasks? Well, that's great, and that's great information. And Mike and I have talked about that at the user conference, and we talked about it before. I'm sure we'll do a webinar on it at some point in the future. But honestly, until you know the features that are involved, you really don't have that, right? And knowing the features that are involved are really kind of the first step in that. So that's the way I kind of wanted to take a different look at Task Manager and talk about the features and how they work. So that's what we got today, is kind of a feature-based view of tasks in the Task Manager in Issuetrak. So where do we want to go first? Well, let's dig in here. Mike left us a kind of a place to talk about why we use the Task Manager. But I didn't want to spend a ton of time on it because I think it's kind of obvious when you see how it works. Um, the idea of the Task Manager is really to claim to claim what you did, claim that action you took, right? So you did this thing, claim it, say that you did it, right? So if there's a normal process, so like Tony said, if there's a normal step one, step two, step three, and you did step two, so nobody else has to do it, claim that, show that you've done that. And for management, so as a person that's involved in a process and has to do things the same way every time for whatever reason, that makes it good for you. You can show that you've actually done it without having to add a note, without having to come up with something to say about the thing you did, right? Because a lot of times, a lot of the work that we do on a daily basis is repetitive, right? I'm going to, yes, I approve this thing, or I checked the event log, or for me, it's scheduled with the customer, provided jumpstart one. That's when jumpstart one complete. That's when I answer all the time. I click, yes, I did. Jumpstart complete, jumpstart one. So that's why. That's why we use the task manager. That's why we recommend it. And the features, as you're going to see, the features are really powerful and really good at showing that, right? It's about taking responsibility for that thing that you do every day. So let's dig in. The first thing we want to, one of the early things early on, we want to introduce that concept of permissions. And this is the way Mike and I like to teach features in Issuetrak. We think about people and user accounts first. So let's do it. Now, you guys know from the other webinars, the other training time that you've had with us, that the best practice, right? Always, always, always use groups to grant permissions. So I'm going to go into my Issuetrak site, and I'll log out and log back in for you guys so you can see exactly how I did that, right? cstraining.issuetrak.com, and I use my credentials. Now, there are other credentials for this site that we can share with you guys. I'll share those later. So I'm going to log in using my stored credentials here. And I'm a sysadmin, so I have God level access. But let's look at the access that's related just to tasks. And to show you that, I'm just going to click on any one of these groups. And I want a group that really anybody could belong to. Notice I'm not clicking on an agent only group here. So and let's just click at it. Now, as you might imagine, to find the issues that are the permissions that are related to tasks, we could do a Control F and find tasks, or we could just look for permissions that have the word tasks in them. And there you go. They're right here, right under this workflow section. And we are editing this group, so I'm going to grant this group some new permissions today. Things like can assign tasks. So you can take a task that's existing and assign that to somebody else that has the appropriate permissions. Right? You may not be able to assign it to yourself if you don't have the appropriate permissions, but you can give that to somebody else who does. So here you go, right? Can be assigned tasks. If you have that permission, you can assign tasks to yourself, or you can be given that task assignment from other folks, or pre-populated with that task assignment when you build the task group or the quick pick. And then we've got can view tasks and issues. This is a really basic one, kind of table stakes here. To know what's going on, you need to see the steps of the process, right? And this allows you to view all of the tasks on the issues you're allowed to see. So a task is a part of an issue right there, right? That kind of sets the stage for us for in a minute when we go in and look at process. Always, it's a part of an issue. It's not about the whole issue. It's about the tasks portion. And then can edit tasks and issues. So this is kind of a step up. You're allowed to change the tasks that are part of an issue. You can reassign, or if it's the task, there's a misspell, you can go in and change a misspelling, or you could add new tasks as necessary. That's the idea. That's what those mean. That's what those are. And if there's questions, we'll answer them kind of at the end of this session here. So let me see if I can kind of get through, or pose the questions now and we'll kind of try to answer some of them as we go along. But if we hit any that we don't cover, then we'll cover them at the end. Now, there we go. And the other thing, we always get questions about this. So when we start thinking about these processes, there's two sort of main types of tasks. There's these pre-filled tasks versus these user-defined. And when you go into reporting, the reason we say it that way, it's not that obvious when you look at a task on an issue, for those of you that do that. You may say, well, there's none of those in my site, right? Well, and what we're talking about is when you look at the report writer, the reason this is important for us to kind of cover is under the report writer, when we go to report on tasks, the name of the task, right, can either be a name of a predefined task or the name of a user-defined tasks, but they're stored in different columns, right? When you pull that field into a report, like here under issues tasks, there's one column for one data point for user-defined tasks and a separate data point for pre-filled tasks. And here you go, task title predefined and task title user-defined. Now, I think we're going to cover reporting later on. I don't want to get too much into that, but you can see those will be two separate columns on the report. The best practice here is to use only one or the other, because if you mix these together, it's going to be really confusing to read the reports. Right? Or if you do use both kinds of tasks, right, don't use them on the same issue. Don't try to pull them into the same report. So let's go and take a look at that. What is that? Where does that really get set up, that difference between a predefined and a user-defined tasks? Well, when we go into administration, you guys saw what I just did. Clicked on administration and then went to tasks. And we get that list all idea here, right? This is the list of predefined tasks. So this site itself only has one predefined task in it. And what does that say, right? You can read it, right? Use only user-defined tasks, right? Well, there's an extra R. I misspelled it when I typed it. And the idea here, Mike had some good ideas here. The pre-filled task does have some advantages, right? So we pre-fill that task, then it's available as a drop-down, right? So we can make sure that it's always consistently spelled, hopefully consistently spelled correctly, right? And if it's not, we can go back and edit. But we can't create a new task on the fly, right? We have to go back to that administration drop-down menu to create new tasks. User-defined tasks, on the other hand, we can add those right from the issue. I can create a brand new task right on the issue. But if we're using a naming convention, that can kind of mess up our naming convention, or we can have a misspelling very easily because the spelling and the naming conventions are not enforced on those user-defined tasks. Now, let me go back and show you what I'm talking about here. When we talk about tasks, right, we always want to have a task as part of a larger process, right? One task, usually if there's a step 1, usually there's going to be a step 2 and a step 3, right? There may not be more than that, but usually we're going to have those in a more than one idea, right? It's going to be a process, part of a larger task list or a larger step. And that's what the task list gives us right here. And I had one kind of laid out for us to look at here. So when we go to the list of processes, the list of tasks, right? And I like this one down here. I was going to show you guys the project management one that I created here. So this is sort of the normal flow of a project, right? Because I get questions about this from time to time, right? Project is a way of connecting issues, and I'm kind of the connect issues guy, right? I get questions about that a lot. So you can see right here, right? Our first step is to identify stakeholders, then complete any necessary pre-work approvals. If we need to get something done, approved ahead of time, let's do it now. Then we get into our milestones, right? And the milestone, of course, if you have can edit tasks, then you could change that name of that milestone to something that actually makes sense, to actually what's there, right? And I'm going to go into the task manager. So speaking of features, right? The task manager is how we edit or add new tasks or add task groups. You can see that. So once we save this as a task group, then we use the task manager to add it where it needs to be added. But I'm going to click new task. So let's add a new task to this group. And there's our drop down, right? With that one task in it. Right below that, there's our user-defined task name, right? Oh, and this is the illustrating the drawback of a user-defined task, right? I put the S in capital instead of in lowercase, right? And I want that to be 10, the dependency order 10. Now, some of the other fields involved are things like dependency order, right? You have to have dependency order 1 done before you go on to dependency order 2. You've got to have dependency order 2 done before you go on to 3, so on and so forth, right? If tasks have the same dependency order, I'll make this one 9, perfectly allowable, but then this has to be done, all of the dependency 9 tasks have to be done before you can go on to dependency order 10. And I'm going to give us a nice little assign to. This is a wildcard used in building tasks, really useful when you know the person that's going to do this task is the owner of the issue, the assignee. The other thing we've got here as far as a feature, it's called a task note. And it's not a note on the issue, it's a note about doing the task. Right? Some of my customers love these because then you have a note about the specific work step. So let's get this saved. And I'm going to push this one up because it really should go up a little higher, even though the dependency is the same on these two. Really, this one should come before closing the issue. Then I'll do a save and an update. And we're going to look at some other features of tasks too before we kind of get to that. And I may have lost by clicking to the wrong place on the screen there. That's very important when you work with tasks to click save or update every time save or update is offered. It really allows you to make sure you're saving the tasks. And I may have just violated my own rule, right? No, there we go. We saved it. There's milestone 8. Right now, I need a quick reminder for myself of what Mike wanted me to talk about next year. So we talked about, we want to talk about due date with reminder. So you saw on the task, there was a due date. So when we build the task, predefined or user-defined, we could put in a due date there. And if you've got the calendar turned on, you can even take that and set a reminder. Remind me a day before it's due. Remind me 2 days before it's due. It's very nice, but the due date has to be set first. Then you click into reminder. Really nice functionality, but the prerequisite is that the that the due date has to be entered first and the calendar has to be turned on. So let's go on. Now, Mike had kind of created some of these slides, so I want to remember, make sure I get everything that he wanted me to include, right? Why should we use the task manager and the task feature in general, right? Well, it's to claim what you did. You're doing these things every day, right? So claim that you've done them, so your management team can see. You can even add labor hours on tasks if you need to. So that idea that, hey, I did this thing and it took me an extra hour, right? Well, there you go. That becomes a task. And oh, yes, no versus complete task. I think I skipped a slide there. Sometimes we need a task that is just a punch list item. And you guys saw that in my task group, right? We're going to complete milestone number 8, right? And that's just a checklist. It has to be done before we go on to closing the issue, right? Or we got to complete milestone 2 before we go on to milestone 3. It's just a complete item. Punch list. And we'll edit these so you can kind of see how that looks, right? Just a complete. The only option the user gets is to click, yes, I did that, to click complete. Now, other tasks in Issuetrak, other times we're doing approvals, right? The task manager is really nice with approvals because we have this yes, no feature. So that's the other kind of task, right? Not just a complete type, a yes, no. So the user is presented with the assignee is presented with that option of yes, no, or NA. And on yes, we can have certain activities done, like adding a task group, canceling open tasks, closing the issue, or updating the substatus. Or we can, the other fields still apply too. So we call this workflow branching. And in this case, we're asking, is it okay to close the issue? Because we're at the end of our workflow. And I think that's okay. I think we want to cancel and close, right? We want to cancel all the open tasks, anything that's open, and we want to close it. Now you want to remember this one's dependency order 10, so everything else has to be done before we get here. And that's what a yes, no task does for us. And you can kind of see that. I click that, let's do an update, come on. There we go. And you can see those, that workflow branching right here in the task group view, right? Add task group on yes, add task group on no. Let's look at the one that I just built down here for project management. Apologies for that being really generic, but I think it's easier to learn when you see something really generic at this level. So there we go. On close issue, if the answer is yes, we're going to cancel remaining tasks, and we're going to close the issue. All right, now let's go back and make sure I haven't forgotten to tell you guys about anything in tasks. And of course, it helpfully goes on to the next one. So we've got our yes, no documentation. And email notification, we send emails when your task is available, not when it's assigned. So the task becomes available, that's when you get the email about it, not when it becomes assigned. And then we've got visual representation. As you complete tasks on an issue, you see those answers, whether it's a complete answer or a yes, no. We can look at that later in the follow-up section. We're getting ready to have Dan come in, so I don't want to hold him up any. And then the flexibility, right? You saw especially with user-defined tasks, we can accommodate almost any process that can be defined as steps. And that's what a process is, right? A series of steps. So we can accommodate almost anything using the parallel versus series. So you saw that items that have the same dependency order or different dependency orders, and using the different names and assigning the tasks out. The task list itself just allows that issue to walk through different departments and have the right process done the same way every time.
And Paul, the yes, no task, it gives you the added flexibility to make it a dynamic process.
Right. That's what that workflow branching is all about. When you add that extra task group, you see that happen. We'll do a quick example because I always like to apply tasks a little bit. And that's it's not really supposed to be an applied task session, but let's do an applied example really quickly because I think that helps me put everything together. And we'll do have HR tasks in here. HD. Well, I thought we had our HR. All right. Well, let's do change request for.
One of the examples I use while you're looking for that, Paul, especially on an IT application, is somebody wanting to purchase software
Right.
or purchase a piece of IT equipment. You can, you're going to have different signature levels to sign off on based upon the dollar value. So you can put a task in there, a yes or no. Is this above $1,000 purchase? If you
Right.
go no, it advances to the manager who's going to make the approval. If it's above $1,000, then you can fire off an additional workflow to bring in those other managers for the approval process.
And that's those yes no tasks that we saw. We'll do a different example. We'll do a new employee right here. Here's my new employee. There we go. And I'm going to skip this down to the task. So this uses those task groups that we just saw. And this first one, right, uses a yes, no. Is employee full-time? And if we answer yes, then we get the next task group in line. Will employee be working remote? Well, oh yeah, right, this day and age, right? And then we get another task group. Now, each of those were a separate task group, so they're not limited by the number of tasks at all, right? Some of those only had one task in them, but then this one has several tasks in it. And you can see we've got dependency order set up here. So these tasks are higher in dependency than these, and these all have the same dependency, so we can do them at the same time. Right, that's the applied example. I kind of wanted you guys to see how that works. And I think we're what are we, within about 4 minutes of going to our next session, right? Next section here. Are there any questions? Anything I need to about tasks in specifically? Task group listing. How do you get all of the columns? I don't.
I'll follow up
Yeah. If you could
offline.
follow up. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd want to know what columns you're missing. What columns are missing? Okay, so we'll figure that out. We'll get you fixed up.
I'll reach out to you after later today, Donald.
Yep. All right, now, so we're going to take a 3-minute or so break here, and the next person to speak will be our new CEO, Dan Flowers.